Began with an image of with an image that is in the book of an older man, Ben Wilf, looking out the window of his house, and he's leaving. He's alone in this house. He's packed up all of his belongings, and it's a home he's lived in for a long time. And he is gazing across Division Street, and he sees this boy at his window, Waldo, and they strike up a conversation. And Waldo is holding an iPad, and he's holding the iPad up to the stars. That's how it started. I didn't know who they would be to each other. I didn't have it all plotted out. I just really knew the characters, and other characters sprang up around them. So, around Ben sprang up Mimi and Sarah, his daughter, and Theo, his son. And around Waldo sprang up his father, Shankman, and his mother, Alice. They just began to populate my imagination. And I started writing the novel, and I wrote, in the book that you've read, those first two sections, not the very opening with the car accident, but the first section in 2010 on the night that Ben and Waldo meet underneath the magic tree. And New Year's Eve 1999, that section was Waldo's birth, and Theo and Sarah and New Year's Eve. And then I lost my way because I was trying to tell the story backward in time. I thought I'd keep on going backward in time. I don't know where I thought I was going backward in time or why that was so interesting, but I thought I was going to keep on going backward in time. And you can't really do that. There are a few novels that do, but for the most part, you run out of your characters if you keep going backward in time. So where I hit the wall was when Waldo was born on New Year's Eve of 1999. And then if I kept on moving backward in time, no Waldo. And that wasn't okay at all. But I couldn't figure out any other way to tell the story. And in great sorrow, I put those pages in a drawer. And I really didn't think I'd ever come back to them. It wasn't like I was thinking, I have a plan for this someday. I didn't. So a lot of life happened, a lot of years passed. And during that time, I wrote other books. I learned a lot about craft, actually, even though I'd written many books before, but I did learn a lot about how to tell a story out of sequence, how to tell a story that's not chronological, which was something I was really interested in doing because I think that that's how we experience life. Time moves inexorably forward, but we are always experiencing life in a non-chronological way, our memories, our imaginations, and I wanted to try to capture that. So I was learning a lot, craft-wise. If any of you read or want to read my memoir, Hourglass, which is all about marriage, mine, but I was interested in inquiring into the idea of being with another person for a long time and, for the duration, which is a phrase that Wendell Berry wrote in one of his essays and I loved. And so I wrote this memoir, Hourglass, and it's completely not chronological. And I learned so much about how to do that kind of work, writing that book. Also, what happened in that decade is I found out that my father who raised me had not been my biological father. I found that out completely randomly and accidentally from doing a home DNA test on a whim. And I had always been writing about secrets. All my life as a writer, I wrote about secrets, but now I realized that I was the secret, that I had been the secret in my family. And I went on a whole odyssey, which Olivia referenced, my memoir, Inheritance. That is what that book is about. And I learned a great deal about the way that who we are to each other, sometimes without knowing it. Why do we sometimes feel like we connect to someone, a perfect stranger? Why do we feel like we know someone? They're so familiar. What are our, we know what some of our relationships are in life, but we don't know what all of them are. And I learned that in a really profound way when I realized that I had an actual biological father wandering somewhere around the world who was a perfect stranger to me. And I was able to learn a lot about that, but I mostly learned how much we don't know about the ways that we touch each other. And the other two things that happened during those years is that my husband, who is now completely well and healthy, was diagnosed with a very serious cancer and went through this year of a reckoning, and of, what it is to have life be like perfectly normal at one moment and then completely upended. And then all of our lives, pretty much within 6 months of my husband's recovery, all of our lives were upended by the pandemic. So here I was back at home. We were all back at home. I mean, those of us who were lucky enough to be home were back at home. And my son was back from college. My husband was back from making a movie. I was back from no longer going on any more book tours. And one day I got sick and tired of baking sourdough bread or, whatever it was that we were all doing, reading recipes endlessly and running around with my dog. And I decided to clean out my office closet, like Marie Kondo my office closet. And what's cool about being with you all on Zoom is that you can see my office closet. It's right there behind me, that closet. So I'm cleaning it out. I have hefty bags. I'm like just getting rid of things that don't spark joy. And then all of a sudden, behind all of these layers of other stuff was this little pile of pages. And that little pile of pages was the beginning of Signal Fires. And something just told me, read this, and just sit down and read this. And I did. So I sat down right here, right in that moment. I reread those 100 pages, and my mind kind of exploded because I suddenly understood what I needed to do. And it needed all that time. What the question that I asked myself that opened up the book again was, oh, I've written 2 sections of this book. One took place on one night in 2010. One took place on one night of effectively 2000, the last day of 1999. And now it's 2020. Now it's another 10 years later. And who would these characters be? Who would Waldo be? He'd be a college student. Where would he be? What would have become of him? Where would Theo be? The 2 characters I immediately connected to in that way were Waldo and Theo, because Waldo's life would have changed the most because he would have become a grown-up or a young adult. Theo, as a chef with his own restaurant, would be back in Brooklyn during the height of the first wave of the pandemic. Food is love to him. He doesn't know how to connect to people any other way. What would Theo be doing? What would he do? And I asked myself those questions. I didn't even ask them. They instantly started answering themselves. And that's how I re-entered the book. And once I did, I don't know about you all, but I had a very good pandemic, because I became immersed in this novel. And every day I woke up and I had a sense of purpose, and these characters were very much alive for me. And it was almost as if they had been like sleeping for those 14, 15 years. And they woke up and I woke up. I was ready for them. And all of those years were like a training ground that got me there.
I think that one of the themes that resonated so deeply with me, was one thing, the soul debt that we see carried on with Theo and Mimi because of how tormented they are because of this thing that is in their history, and the silence and the poisoning sort of holding a secret and a shame so deeply, and how it kind of seems to permeate everything they do and they feel, sort of compelled to suffer and create their own suffering through the course of their lives in various ways because that they kind of got this free pass on something that was tragic and heavy and needed to be dealt with at the time. And then also with our sweet little boy Waldo, that maybe because coming out of the pandemic and that kind of sense of vulnerability that everybody was sort of experiencing, I was very raw and open-hearted for him and his awkwardness and his desire to fit and desire to be seen and just to be accepted for the special nature that he is. And I think as a parent, if I'm honest with myself, I mean, I'm like, a taskmaster. Like I want everything exactly as I envision it to be exactly all the time. And, you're unforgiving in that way. And I mean, it's a really kind of revelation to look at parenting from the little boy's eyes of, God, if only these adults would accept me for me as like a true human being who is complicated and is exactly as the universe designed me to be, and appreciate me for who I am. That was just, to me, one of the characters that that everything that he went through and felt and needed and didn't get, just like hit me heavy. And I thought it was just like one of the most beautiful parts of the book. Do we want to have, while we have Dani here, is there anybody who wants to ask her any questions about this, get some clarity on some of these character arcs? Jim, hi. And Jim, by the way, and I also want to, I haven't read it yet, but I just got it. This is still Dani. So reissuing of your book from 10 years, it's 10-year anniversary, right?
Yes. So they brought out a new edition with a foreword that I added to it. Yeah.
Congratulations. And
Thank
Jim
you.
is a writer as well. Hi, James.
Hi. I wanted to congratulate you on your book. It was beautiful. I particularly your writing style. You used a lot of short sentences throughout the entire book, and that really produced a cadence in the book that was really fast, and it worked really well. It made me read faster, actually. So I found it to be very refreshing and very well done. My question for you is who is your writing hero? Who when you look on all the authors that you follow or whatever, who is your hero? Who do you emulate, if you will?
Living or dead?
Either.
I sort of worship at the altar of Virginia Woolf. And I think actually that Signal Fires, her influence on me is probably more present in Signal Fires than in any of my books because of her, the way that she deals with time. I mean, time for me is, I'm more interested in time than just about anything, and how we, how literature can capture time, play with time to illuminate something about what it is to be human. And she does that just so magnificently, and also the inner life and the way that she creates the inner life. My mentor in graduate school was Grace Paley, the great short story writer. And I was so lucky to know her and so lucky to study with her. And I would say that our work is really different, so different, but she modeled for me that it was possible to have a life as a writer. So I hold her very close.
Thank you.
George Marie, I saw you waving your hand.
Hi. I absolutely loved this book. It just really spoke to me with all the family dynamics. And when I started reading it, I thought, why was Sarah an alcoholic? And then I realized it's because her mom and dad, they put her so low on the totem pole. I mean, they said Theo's my orchid and Sarah's a weed. And that girl was drinking before the accident. And that's why she gave Theo the keys. And I loved Waldo to bits, but I just felt so bad for Sarah. And it reminded me of this comedian who said her mom was like the boy, I love you, you're my prince. And she says to the girl, you're fat. I mean, is this dynamic between mother and daughter? I don't know. It spoke to me a lot. But even the father said that, oh, Sarah's strong. She doesn't need us like Theo. And they couldn't have been more wrong. And I was really angry at those people for that. And then with the Shankmans, there was no acceptance from anybody. Shankman didn't even accept himself. There was no way he could accept his wife or his son. And his son was just, I just loved Waldo. I would love to read a book about Waldo now as an adult. Another Waldo book. That's what we need. The book
Thank
was
you for
amazing.
that. Thank you for that. I love everything that you just said. And it's true. I mean, there's a lot of failure of parenting in the book, right? I mean, there's love. And Shankman loves Waldo. He just hates himself, and he doesn't know how to be a dad to Waldo. And Alice is too passive and kind of goes along with it. But what you say about the Wilfs is really interesting to me. I think that's really right. But I mean, with Sarah, the way that I thought of her becoming an alcoholic is that it was incipient. It was there. But her life could have gone differently, and it might never have, sort of caught fire. She might have just been a, messed up teenager who drank a little bit too much, and then life could have gone a different way. But the accident then sort of throws, just ignites the whole thing.
But the analogy of a weed is, it is supposed to be a complement, correct? Like, it is supposed to be the strength against, to thrive in all circumstances. However, it sort of dehumanizes somebody because it means that you don't need to tend to them, or they don't need your love or care or support because they'll survive anyway. And it allows you to be dismissive of whether it's a parent, a spouse, a friend, because you think, oh, they're the ones that are always going to be okay regardless. Yeah.
I've got to say, you all, nobody's made that point before. And I've talked to a lot of people, and it's really it's a really interesting point because, I've thought over the years of, Waldo is not based on my own kid, but my own son was definitely, an orchid. He needed a certain environment in which to blossom, which he really did. But I was aware that we couldn't just throw him anywhere and have him, So I think where my imagination took me to was, what would it be like to have a sibling who you could put into any environment and would thrive? And what would that do to a dynamic of a family?
And things continue to be shaped on because of that, on into the future. We have Dani for a few more minutes before she is going to reorganize for an.
You can see my suitcase over there.
Joyce, hi, I see you.
Joyce.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Dani.
Hi, Joyce.
So good to see you.
You too.
I wanted to ask you about your title. I have a lot of questions about the book. It's a wonderful book. I told you that, how much I loved it. But the signal fires, the epigraph that you use, did the title and the concept of that come first? Or did the idea of interconnectedness come first? Which was, because signal fires could be a warning rather than a beacon.
Yes, it could be.
So which came first, I guess, in your thinking?
The title came last. I had the entire novel, and I did not have a title. The file, and that's happened to me a couple of times. I've also had other books, like my memoir Devotion, where I saw the word and I knew what I was doing, which, I didn't even want. I was like, oh no, I don't want to write about my spiritual, midlife existential crisis. Oh no. But it appeared. It was like Devotion. No, this is it. With Signal Fires, the entire novel. When I started it, I didn't have a title. When I returned to it, I didn't have a title. And the file name, once I returned to it on my computer, was Magic Novel, which it still is. It's still Magic Novel on my computer. I never changed it to Signal Fires. And I finished it, and I had no title, and I tried. I mean, I often read a lot of poetry when I don't never grasp for a title. They always appear eventually, but I was reading a lot of poetry, and then one day I was on Twitter, of all things, where most like good things don't tend to really happen on Twitter. But and usually when I'm on Twitter, it means my writing day isn't going well, because what am I doing on Twitter? But there I was, and a poet that I'm friendly with, who I follow, Ukrainian poet named Ilya Kaminsky, he had tweeted something like, writers, tell me about works of literature or poetry that do interesting things with memory. And because I was interested in Ilya and the people who follow him, I followed that thread. And on that thread was the Carolyn Forche poem, Morning. And there was that stanza, the one that I use as the epigraph. There it was. And I read it. And it just was like in neon. And I thought, has anyone else used this title before? I hope not. That's what it was like. It was, and the words themselves resonated so deeply with what I had already written, and the idea of signal fires. Yes, they can be a warning, but they can also be a beacon.
Yeah.
And that's how I read it, and that's how I thought of all of these people, and in a way it connected to an idea I've had for many years. I mean, when I would like lead a retreat, a writing retreat or something like that, I would sometimes say to my students afterwards, when you go home, those maps that show you where, like on meditation apps or various like maps that show you where, certain populations are in the world, that kind of thing, that light up. I would say to them, you can all think of yourselves as, being lights, as writers. You're in Omaha, and you're in Hawaii, and you're in Detroit, and you're in New York, but everybody's kind of just got their lights on. I would say that. I had never heard the term signal fires. So that's how it came to me. It was a wonderful, sort of moment of, sort of closure on the novel to know that had to be the title.
It's a beautiful poem, by the way, if anybody wants to go back and read the whole poem.
Yeah, she's a beautiful poet.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that one
Thank
down.
you.
Dani, I wonder what conversations happen in your household. I mean, having written multiple memoirs, knowing that you're like an excavator of your life and your relationships and your history and everything, it must take great confidence in relationships or for spouse and family members to say, yes, this is what you do, and yes, we're here for the exploration. Is that a challenge? And is there a collective like, woof, she switched back to fiction for your family?
No, I mean, maybe for my extended family, I don't know, but for my immediate family, for my husband, for my son, no. I think part of it is that my husband's a writer too. And he knew what he was signing up for, and we're different. We're very different writers. And he would say he doesn't write autobiographically, even though he absolutely does. It's just not. It's not as recognizable as mine. My son has grown up in this world, and I was very careful. Still am. But when he was little, I just thought, you didn't ask to be born to a mother who's a writer, and I never want to embarrass you, and I never want you to be uncomfortable, and I never want you to be 30 years old and looking at me thinking and saying, I wish you hadn't written that about me. I don't want that to happen. I'd rather not write it. So that was those were my guardrails. And they seem to have really worked. And he gets a kick out of it. He knows that he has an unusual life in that way. People will meet him and feel like they know a lot about him, or they'll meet him and he'll be frozen in time at a different age. You know, he's 23 years old and someone will meet him and they think he's supposed to be 6 or something. It's like, well, you're so big. Like, well, that was a book that my mom wrote a long time ago. But he's also surrounded by a lot of he has friends whose parents are artists and writers and filmmakers, and it's sort of just the world that he grew up in. So it's not, no, I mean, if my parents were living, I'm not sure how happy they would be. And at the same time, though, if my parents were living, I probably would never have written Inheritance. I mean, certainly would have been a very different book, but I might never have written it because I have tried to be careful. I haven't always been able to be because I've also tried to be honest, but I would never want to. I mean, in the case of Inheritance, for example, that was a story that my parents really wanted to take to the grave with them. And they did. And they couldn't have imagined a moment where I would be able to know this, about myself. So that's my story. I get to tell that story. But if they were living, I don't think I would have. So anyway, y'all, I gotta go finish packing. But does anybody have one last question or anything before I pop off?
If you would just so briefly, just mention the tree, just the concept of the beauty of that kind of heart of the street and the tree and the energetic idea behind it. Yeah,
I am so interested in place over time, and that tree. I'm writing the TV pilot now for Signal Fires, and at least for the moment, the way it opens is in the 1800s with logging happening on a field, and a little boy, his father and his older brother are, cutting down trees, and the little boy says, "Not that one, Dad, that's my tree. Don't cut that one down." And that's the tree. And then it grows and grows and grows over time. The trees we're surrounded with are, have been here long. Many of them have been here long before we got here, and they're going to be here long after we leave. And, this accident happens at that tree. And what does it mean to generations afterwards in this neighborhood? All they know is that the tree is decorated, and the tree has lights, and the tree has tinsel. The tree has those things because of a grieving family. But the neighborhood kids, as the generations go by, don't know that. So I felt like the tree is sort of sentry, the guard, beneficent kind of presence that casts its canopy over all of these people and in a way knows everything. That's how I think of it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. Please have a limoncello for all of us.
Will do. All right. Nice to meet you all, and have a good conversation.
Thank you. Safe travels.
Bye.
It's a pleasure to have had you. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so we'll continue on. There we go. Hey. So, was there anybody who struggled with this book, didn't click with this book? I was saying to my friend Jody earlier, I think I had such an immediate affinity for this book because I love Inheritance so much, and I could sort of hear the voice and her personal journey and sort of like that emotional trajectory in the characters of this story. And so I felt very locked into it right away. But it's also, there's a lot of painful stuff in it and a lot of hard scenes. And so I think that it's one of those books that you could probably have strong emotional reactions, positive and negative. So Jody, what is just starting? No, it was a more challenging one for you.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there were definitely good things, how can you not love Waldo and, the magic with the tree but but yes, in general, I struggled a bit with this book. I did feel it was a bit choppy with the different dates and stuff, but yeah, the main thing for me was just, it was a little depressing for me, and I don't know if it maybe just hit too close to home. I have a grandmother going through Alzheimer's, and the pandemic, and the struggles after a big event, how that impacts the whole life for these kids. And I don't know, it was a little rough for me, but I mean, I liked how everyone was connected. That was really cool. And but overall, it was not my favorite.
Well, from a parenting perspective, it makes you think, like, you get it, that in the moment of a crisis, you're thinking, okay, let me try to mitigate that, like minimize the impact long term, because everybody makes mistakes, and like, let's not make this one terrible moment, ruin their lives. And you would go into that protective mode of, if you could sweep things under the rug, if you have, the resources or the influence to do so. And you're thinking about it only on this sort of like superficial level of like actual ramifications, but on the real level, the impact is there, and it's all starts flowing. And it's like, what are we doing that we think is making things better for other people that we love, and we're actually making things worse? And that, I think, to me was like, whoa, that made me feel like a little paranoid. like a little nervous, because I could see 1,000% being in that moment and saying, oh my God, okay, what can I do now to fix this? And you really can't fix anything. I mean, in truth, when something is happening, it's happening, and the impacts are going to be what they're going to be. So Vicky, it's great to see you. What did you think about this book? And had you read anything from me? And also, if anybody, let me know if anybody has read any of Dani's other books before, because she's got so many.
Hi, it was so great to have her join us. I have not read her other book, Inheritance, but I think maybe I need to put it on my TBR list. So I really liked this book. I really loved, my favorite part was the relationship between Waldo and Ben. I just loved that. I wish it could have almost been a little bit more. There was a part in the book that I was going to ask her about. So Waldo experienced Mimi passing away, remember, in the little playhouse. He saw that. And then when he went to the oak tree, he felt Misty Zimmerman, the gal that died, he felt her presence and saw her. But I don't remember him seeing his mother when his mother passed away. And even after I finished the book, I went back and even looked to when his mom died. And I was kind of surprised she didn't put that in the book when his mom passed, like seeing her. So that was something that I wish she would have put in there. And my one little probably criticism is I had a hard time getting past the fact that they didn't really investigate why Sarah crashed into the tree. Somebody died, and it seemed like it was just kind of like, oh, okay. Like, she didn't have a breathalyzer. They didn't find out why she crashed in the tree. That seemed a little bit, I don't know. But other than that, I really liked the book. I thought it was very good. And yeah, I did. I liked it a lot. It was short. So, I mean, I was surprised it took her 15 years to write it. That was really interesting. She said it took 14 to 15 years from beginning to end. That's amazing. Yeah.
Putting it away and picking it back up again. And I really, so if you read Inheritance, you will like go on that journey with her about what it was she was always trying to figure out about herself, and why she kept writing these memoirs and trying to dig into something that felt something. And to me, it kind of shapes this novel that how we don't always understand each other, and in one household we don't quite click, and why we don't kind of get each other or feel seen or feel accepted for who we are. And so her journey of uncovering this big mystery, which is detailed in Inheritance, is really, really, really interesting, because it's kind of a flip, like, send that DNA swab away, her husband's doing it, and then all of a sudden everything about her identity is shifted, and all of these revelations are happening after her parents have passed. So she doesn't have the opportunity to go and ask the questions that, she would want to. And it happens to be the part of her identity that always meant the most to her. And it's the parent who she always felt the most understood and seen and connected to. So it kind of just like blows up a lot of her perspective on family. So it's really an interesting book.
Okay. All right.
Sarah actually was breathalyzed and handcuffed. They did breathalyze her and they handcuffed her. Yeah. Yeah. They just didn't say if she did time or not.
Yeah, I think then it just kind of, suburban life kind of gets cleaned up right away, right? I'm sure. Yeah, that part I don't remember as well, but it was and we know it happens, right? I mean, everything that happens in based on where you are and who you are, things are certainly handled quite differently.
Right.
Lisa or Pamela, do you guys want to share any of your thoughts on the book?
Yeah, I enjoyed the book. When I got done, I was kind of like, that was okay. So I had to process it a little bit. And I think from just listening to people talk, it's kind of made me like the book better after listening to perspectives. But I really am glad to have met or seen and listened to the author. I'm going to definitely check out Inheritance. So yeah, I think I'm looking forward to the TV pilot too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be really good, I'm sure. But no, I think I did enjoy it. But I do agree that it was a little choppy. I think Jody said that. I felt like I was going back and forth, like, okay, now what's going on? Now what's going on?
Right.
But no, I think I did enjoy it actually. Yeah, there's not very many books I don't enjoy. I read so many. I escape. It's like,
exactly. Yeah, but there were some parts. I mean, I found the parts with and then with the daughter it's Sarah as an adult and kind of like what she was going through in the affair and just kind of the ugliness of what she was putting herself through. To me, those were the hardest parts of the book. That just made me feel sad because it was like, she really was carrying so much with her.
Right. And then as I think back on my own parenting, my husband and I's own parenting and things that happened, like, with our daughters, it's like, we don't want anybody to know that, and,
right.
It's like facing reality.
Yeah.
Nothing bad, but just things that as a parent, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that,
Uh-huh.
So,
well, and two, also the pressure to be so silent about something that you're ashamed of, but not even to be able to rely on being open with your own family who's there and know.
Right. That really almost hurt my heart because I'm like, communication's big in our family and that was heavy. So I can see how that manifested in those children as they grew older.
Exactly. Yeah. That level of secrecy and not even being able to share with those who already know that is like that toxicity is so so impossible and detrimental. Pam, and then I see Joyce's hands again, I think.
Hi, I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I'm at my notes here. Just deeply written characters, was powerful, beautiful writing. I did have a little trouble kind of going back and forth, but I thought it was good. The author takes you right into the story, and by the end of the book, you get to know these characters so well. And like with Waldo's father, I really love Ben and Waldo's relationship, but like with Waldo's father, I kind of feel like he didn't know like how to raise his son, and I think he kind of just wanted a normal, son than, the exceptional, awesome kid that he had. And there's a part in the book where he says like, I don't think he had a good relationship with his own father either. And the way that his father spoke to him. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a good book. I liked it.
Yeah. I mean, he wants this traditional, like what he envisioned right? Like the kid who wants to throw the baseball, and you don't know how to like to reform your vision of a father son or parent kid relationship, because you've got one idea locked on and that's not who they are. And so it's like he's so incapable of evolving and adjusting to seeing the beauty of his own child, which is, was like very hard to see, because you're like, dude, come on. Joyce, did you have your...
What struck me about this book, and it's been a while since I've read it, so I might have a few details wrong. I thought was so interesting how people either did things because of their age. Like, for example, Theo is trying to impress Misty, even though he really doesn't know how to drive very well, and we get the whole cigarette and the lighter thing. And Sarah understands that, and she throws him the keys, and of course she's a little drunk anyway. But the other thing, and this is what was so interesting to me, is she, as a big sister, I think she does feel responsible. And she says, oh, I was driving. This is the feeling I got. And then the father, nobody has mentioned this, but Ben comes down. He's a doctor, and he does something he's not supposed to do. He moves her. So there is a possibility that she could have survived this. So I think they're all in their little separate ways living with this terrible guilt. Theo for, driving, and he was a girl he was trying to impress, and look what happened. Sarah, because she feels responsible. She gave him the key. She should have been driving. She knows that. And she does what a big sister does. She tries to cover up and defend her brother. He's probably not up for it. And Ben was trying to save the girl. And I think as a result, they're all stuck in this terrible guilt from this incident, and because nobody talks about it. And I think this is one of the things she's trying to tell you in the book, is when you have a secret like this that is so painful and you don't talk about it, it not only affects your whole life, and it isolates you. And what was interesting to me was an epitome of that was Ben. He's at his family, his kids are gone. His wife has Alzheimer's. He is saying goodbye to the house that he's never going to live in again. And he must be feeling this in such a strong way. And he looks out the window and he sees Waldo. And this kid, Waldo, he's isolated, I think, and Dani said, in a different way. He's isolated because the father doesn't really get him. And I think in the book, Ben is supposed to be his spiritual father, who does get him and who can share that thought with him, that about the universe. And I was just amazed by the iPad part of this. I have to tell you, I read something where Dani said that app was spiritual to her. Was spiritual to her. And you're thinking, how can an app be spiritual? He's looking up at the world and he's looking at the universe, and they see the interconnectedness. And then you have that magnificent passage at the end of the book, which I think is just so magnificent. It's so beautiful. And, but, it's what he does with it. And, maybe he grows up to be an astrophysicist or something. Anyway, I just thought that they helped each other in that point. And just a side point, I think apps can be spiritual, because I didn't think so. I have an iPad and I've never found it spiritual, but last summer I saw an exhibit that David Hockney did, where he did everything with an iPad. He did all this artwork with an iPad. I can't do that with a dry app, but he could. And I think there's something about the fact that Waldo had the iPad and the app, and that's what made all the difference.
Well, and you bring up a really good point too, because I kind of have discounted Ben in the implications of all of this, but here is somebody as a doctor, as a father, who is, committed to bettering people's lives and being a caretaker and a protector. And essentially, when he reflects on that street, can be very much thought to blame himself for the death of somebody. I mean, we don't know, had he done something different, not done something, maybe this girl would have survived. And at the same time, he brings this other little boy into the world who, that could have been gone a different way had he not been there. So it's sort of like, the boy is also like his salvation, and kind of, brings things sort of full circle for him as he's like reflecting on his life on this street that has been, full of, tremendous ups and downs. Gina, hi.
Let me unmute myself. I wanted to address something that Joyce said, and she talked about the guilt, and I'll get back to that in just a second, because I really connected with the parenting themes here. And while it came her story came a little bit later in the book, Waldo's mom, I'm the mother of a special needs child, and I remember just really the sweat, blood, and tears, doing everything you could to get my child everything that she needed. And the sacrifices she made that literally, probably the stress led to, her ultimate demise. And I think about her trying to protect her child. And then you look at that parallel to Ben and his, efforts to protect his children. But then I think in that scenario, I would have done what Waldo's mom did. I did what she did. But like in Ben's scenario, I don't think as a parent that I would have saved my child. And I think I would have carried a whole different guilt. Allowing, the son to take the blame, or to, whatever consequence would have happened. And then I think that would have been a whole different guilt. And so I think it was interesting, Joyce, what you were talking about. Had he made a different choice and let the son take the fall, probably intuitively knowing what actually happened, would there have been a different guilt? Would there have been a whole different domino effect in all of their lives? But there was such an interesting dichotomy for me with regards to relating to the parenting themes. One I related to, and one I thought, no, I wouldn't have taken that path.
Well, I think if it's parenting, there's going to be guilt involved regardless, right?
Good point.
Like that part's a given. It doesn't matter what you choose to do. Hillary or Judy, do you want to share anything about your thoughts about signal fires?
I will. Hi, Olivia. I was thrilled to hear that you were doing this today. Like you, I was obsessed with inheritance. And I told Dani that last week, that I was obsessed with that book because I actually do reunion work. I reunite adult adoptees and birth parents in the state of Arizona. So reading her book, although she was not adopted, but the effort that they made to search for the answers that she did not have, I just totally identified with. So I really look forward to Signal Fires. I also thought it was a quick read. I did think it was a little choppy. I read it months ago, so my memory is not as clear. So this is fun to be in this book group and hear it. And I'm in our Brandeis book group in May. We're doing this book, so that's why I wanted to kind of be part of it. So, but I think she's a great writer. I really do, and I'm just getting so much more out of Signal Fires from listening to this discussion. So thank you for having it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I always have a new appreciation for something that I've already read when I hear what somebody else has to think about it. Like that is really like the beauty of the book club. It's for every single person, you're basically reading a different book almost, right? I mean, we're all getting something different out of it. So I want to make sure you give everybody a chance if you want something to share something. Beth and Judy, anything that you want to say about this particular book? Judy's like, no, I'm good.
I agree. I found it very choppy. It was not my favorite book. I loved Inheritance, and I was really looking forward to reading this and loving it. And I just didn't. And what was interesting was I spoke to a younger reader because I thought maybe I just wasn't used to reading books that jump around as much as this did, and maybe younger people in their 30s would appreciate this kind of writing. And she agreed with me. She said, I never knew where I was.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting. I also, the coincidence of Waldo and Ben's wife ending up in the same parking lot in a snowstorm in a mall, I had a little trouble with. So
It was a magical, energetic draw. Right?
that must have been it. Absolutely. But I think she's a great writer.
Yeah.
This just wasn't my favorite book.
The prose is beautiful. And
Yeah.
you know what? I do enjoy books that go back and forth, but I think more recently I've been reading books that say, you know, where it's like Carolyn, you know what I mean? And then this chapter is so and so, and it's giving you, like, it's very clear, the tone, and then the voice feels very different, and you're kind of easier to keep track of the fluidity of whether it's timelines or, you know, perspective than this. But this just felt, you know, like, to me it was more of just like a tapestry of woven emotion, more so maybe than important plot points. And George Marie, I mean, I just wish that I would have let her know that you very rarely like a book, and that it was extra special that you did enjoy this. So, I mean, I don't think that she understood the gravity of this this glowing recommendation. I mean, who could?
This book really spoke to me. And I think the time travel back and forth was important because they were trying to emphasize that time is fluid and not in segments. More of an Einstein kind of thing where, you know, time is fluid and backwards and forwards, and it all comes together with the tree. It was very Buddhist-like. As soon as Shankman let go of everything, he said, let go of the burden of his personality, he became peaceful. And I just thought that was marvelous.
Did we all freeze?
Did Olivia freeze?
You were frozen.
You were frozen, Olivia.
You're unfrozen. Was it me?
Yes. Yes, you were frozen.
Oh
Frozen
gosh,
in
it's like
time and
well, it was
space.
like was I having some sort of a Buddhist experience? Does that have to do with it? Did you put me in that space?
Yeah.
I was like astral projection. That's amazing. Hey, you know what I was thinking about? So we had another author at the same event here with this Brandeis Phoenix chapter, Rebecca Mackay, who wrote I Have Some Questions for You. And that was, it sort of is an interesting companion book to this one because it does jump from like the 90s to present day, but it's very much less about the time and more about how unreliable our memories and perspectives really are. And we believe that we saw something. We believe we knew what we knew, and it's reliable. And then with the perspective of time or insight or revelations outside in our other life, rest of our life, we are like second guess everything, and nothing is real. I mean, that memory is as unreliable as anything. I mean, the most unreliable thing. And so in that way, those two books kind of felt like a little bit like good companion pieces, but I both can be like, okay, wait, what's what? Tell me what's real.
I'm in the middle of reading Rebecca Mackay's book, and you're right. But I want to say, it's so trendy now, this back and forth and back. I don't think I've read a book in the last 2 years that hasn't gone.
Yeah.
I think it's keeping my brain alive because I'm like, okay, like what era am I in now? But it seems extremely trendy for writers to do this type of back and forth.
Yes. I think it is. You're right. Yeah, we're exercising our brains. So it's like a reading and a crossword puzzle all together. Joyce?
I just think that for some of these authors, they are trying to find a way to connect to the present time. And I think they're also trying to find a way to show that time as, who was it who said that? I don't know how to pronounce your first name. Joy, you said that it was fluid. And I think for authors like this, that is what they're trying to do. To try to show the fluidity of time and how important that is. And what our memories are really like, especially with Dani's book. I think she's really trying to show that. And Olivia, as you pointed out, how unreliable memory is when you look back on it.
Because you're a different person. You're a different person then, and the way you perceive things then is completely unlike how you would perceive the same events today. Right? I mean, especially in the Rebecca Mackay book we're talking about. I mean, it's her memories from the 1990s. And so it's your teenage brain observing and being part of, emotional dynamics at a time. And then as a woman who's 40, remembering, and it's like, okay, well, none of that makes sense because you're essentially two different people. But I'm so glad, you guys, that we had this conversation. And I do highly recommend Inheritance. It's incredible. And then I'm having my husband read it right now because he went ahead, he did a big DNA test, which was like very, very involved, like even more, I don't know, sophisticated or whatever, through the Mayo Clinic. And so he calls me one day, and he won't mind if I say this as we wrap. He goes, I don't know who I am anymore, because he's looking through his thing. And he's like, wait a second. Maybe I'm not Irish Italian after all. His whole identity blowing up. And it turns out it's just as you track back, it's the sort of genealogy that goes through to eventually get to where that your people are from. But I thought you really need to read Inheritance, because this book is like speaking to you right now. Like, read that and then let's discuss what's going on, because it's right there for your story. So you guys, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for being here. Jim, good to see you. Appreciate it. Until next time, please give me any recommendations for the next